workflow kind of process perspective, as well as some ideas that I have and for projects and projects that have been done last fall. There were some really good ones done back then, and a couple other sources for where you may get ideas for your projects. So how's this all going to work together? Well, here's a schedule of the last couple of weeks of classes, last month of classes, I guess. And it starts with the 26th of October. You finish up your last lab. Okay, then the lab part of the class is done. And concepts and stuff are something that can happen later, but anyhow, so you've got about a week between when lab 4 is due and when the group project proposal is due. On the 2nd of November, your group project proposal is due, and we'll talk about what a proposal is and what goes in it and outlines and all that kind of stuff also. Then on the 3rd, so the next day, I'm going to post the final exam, and that'll be due on the 7th. So you've got 4 days to work on the final exam. It's an individual thing. It's a take home. The format of the final exam will be essays with choice, and what that means is that I'll give you probably it's usually between 6 and 8 topics to choose from. You have to choose 2. You can choose any 2. And that's it. You just answer those 2 essays, and that's how we'll do it. And that final exam is going to be based mostly on readings and then concept lectures that I've posted so far. So that's the final exam. Now on the 5th, so that's a couple of days later, I will give feedback on your group project proposal. So I'll read through them and then I'll give you feedback, and we'll talk about what the form of that feedback also. Between the 5th and the 24th is time that you get to work on your project. And so you got lots of time to work on that. Now the 25th through the 30th is Thanksgiving break and the reading day. Okay, so you're probably going to be, staying at home. And oh, by the way, you go home on the 24th, and so you'll be working at home at this point. And then on the 1st, the final exam period begins, the official final exam period. And then also on the 1st, your group project presentations and recordings, presentation recordings and report is due. So you've got almost 4 weeks between when you get your feedback from the project proposal to when you have to have everything done and turned in. So I'm hopeful that that's plenty of time for you to get things done. Now, I know there's lots of other stuff that you'll be working on during this time too, probably other projects and other good stuff too, but this is one way that I can try and give you enough time to work on this, for at least as much time as possible. So the group project, the process begins with a proposal, and that'll be due on the 2nd of November, okay? Like I said before. Then within a couple of days, I will give you feedback on that proposal. Now, most of the time, the feedback that I give in your proposal is for you to focus in your ideas. Most of the time, students come up with these project ideas that are a little too big and grandiose given the amount of time that you have to work on them. So most of the time I'll say, are you sure that this part of the project is really necessary? How does having a GUI interface really add to the overall concept of your project? How can you slim this back? How can you make it smaller? And I'll usually give you some ideas on how you might be able to do that. Let's see. Then after you get the feedback and approval, then you do the work you've proposed. Okay, so get together as a group or virtually or whatever and do that work. Then you're going to develop a presentation, recorded presentation and reports, and those will be due on the 1st of December. So I'm going to come back to this. So we'll do some other stuff first. So what goes into a proposal? How do you know what to do with a proposal? You know, nobody's born knowing what goes into a proposal. So here's an outline that you can use. You don't have to, but this one works. Usually you'll start your proposal with an introduction. It says something about what you want to do and why you want to do this project. The why part is really important, mostly because this is your chance to be creative and to try new things. You're working away on these labs and saying, this is okay, but what I really want to do is this. Well, that's a great project idea, and so the why of your introduction is important because it gives me a little idea about where this idea came from, and what are the different members of your group's thoughts, all that kind of stuff. That's probably paragraph or two right there, the introduction. Okay. Then you have a lit review. Now, lit review, that's an academic sounding word, right? This doesn't have to be an academic sounding thing. Most likely, other people or other companies have tried to do something similar to what you're proposing to do. And in there, and so there'll probably be products that come close that do part of what you're talking about, or maybe all of what you're talking about. That's okay. And you may find an article online that says this is a cool thing to do with Ansible, and so what I just want to know is how have other people addressed the same issue that you're talking about doing. And so that lit review is really just kind of builds context around your ideas by saying how other people have done something similar. Now, the next part of your proposal is the most important. That's the methodology. And the methodology says, how are you going to do what you plan to do? What's your project plan? What are you going to do first? What are you going to do second? What are you going to do third? Okay? So break it all down into steps. Now, you remember in the project plans we did for all the labs, the goal of those project plans was to help you as a group to plan out who's going to do what, when were things going to be done. That's the same thing that we're talking about here. This is basically your project plan. Now, the next step is a deliverables, and deliverables is really, what are you going to show me when you're done? How is the world going to change now that you have completed this project? And then last is a project plan, just like we said before, but this one includes Gantt charts and all those things that you did in your lab project plans. It all comes together. Now, the thing that you might notice is that the methodology, deliverables, and project plan all kind of mesh together. And that's basically because you do something, which is a step in your methodology. When you're done, when you've completed that something, you have a deliverable. Something has changed. The architecture is configured, the Ansible role is working, whatever that may be. And so that's the deliverable. And then the project plan is all about how long is it going to do these things? Well, what are the things? The things are the steps in your methodology. So a methodology has a series of steps. The outcome of each one of those steps is a deliverable. And each one of those steps takes time. That's part of the project plan. So those three things all kind of go together, which means that your proposal really has two different components. The introduction, which is what do you want to do and why do you want to do this project? And then the lit review. How have other people done similar things? After that, it's a project plan, okay? And that's what I want you to focus on. That's the thought process that should go into your proposal. We want to do this project, and this is how we're going to do it. That's a proposal. Now, on the 1st of December, you need to turn in a presentation. Well, what should the presentation be like? Well, it should take around 20 minutes to do this presentation. And, it's COVID time, so, this may be a little different than what we're used to. Ideally, everyone will say something. If that's not possible, then you do the best that you can, okay? And I'm going to take that because we're in COVID time. So basically the idea is record a presentation about your project and then post a URL. If you want to post it to YouTube, great. If you want to post it someplace else, great. Just give me a URL so I can watch it. And I'm also going to post all these URLs for everybody so that you all can see what other people have done. Hopefully you're interested, and you got a long winter break with nothing to do anyhow, so just kidding. But you do have a long winter break, and maybe this will be something that'll be fun for you. So demonstrations, whatever that may be, and for some projects demonstrations are appropriate, for others they're not. But if they're appropriate, then I encourage you to do one. If it's not appropriate, then you don't have to. And even if it is appropriate and you don't want to for whatever reason, they're not required, okay? So here's an outline, okay? So a title page, these things are kind of mandatory. So a title page is important because anytime you do presentations to old people, or people at work or whatever, you're always going to want to have a title page, okay? Then the next thing you're always going to want to have for old folks is an agenda. The agenda says, what are you going to tell me first? What are you going to tell me second? What are you going to tell me third? And when are you done? Where's the conclusion part? Because old people are going to be looking for where's the conclusion on this thing, because they're always in a hurry and blah, blah, blah. So an agenda is important. Then the introduction, which we talked about before, the lit review. Hey, wait, this is starting to sound like the proposal, right? Lit review, but the place where it differs from the proposal is that in the proposal you had deliverables, methodologies, project plans, all that kind of stuff. Well, that's done at this point because you do this after you've completed your project. So instead of those three things, you're going to have a results section. What happened? What worked? What didn't work? How would you do it different? What worked? What didn't work? How did it go? And then the last thing is the future research. And all that means is that what would if your buddy was taking this class next fall, what would you tell them to do for a project based on what you did? That's future research or future projects based on what you did, or however you want to say it is fine. But here's a nice little outline. If you do put together this 6-step outline, you're going to cover your 20 minutes for sure. Most people go over it. Nobody ever comes up short of 20 minutes. Not after working for weeks and weeks on this thing. But this will cover what you need to do to present your work, to tell your colleagues what you did and what worked and what didn't work. And then the last thing you need to do is a project report. And the project report is a written version, essentially, of your presentation. And in this case, your project report starts with an introduction. What did you do and why are you wanting to do this project? Then it has a lit review. Hey, wait a second. Then it has a methodology, results, and future work. Well, this is a lot like the parts of your proposal and your presentation. Right. That's exactly what it is. A good project report starts by, on your computer, opening up your proposal, then clicking on File, Save As, and type in Project Report. Okay? Take the proposal that you wrote before and then modify it to convert it to your project report. That's the best way to do it. I have no problem with that. So some of the things that are in your project report are going to be directly out of your proposal. Great, love it. Just saves everybody time. My goal is not to, wear out your little fingers typing. It's to get a report of what you did, and so a lot of these parts are similar. Now, the introduction and lit review, the same. You can change it around, you can update it, you can do that kind of stuff, but not too much needs to change in there. The methodology, well, you wrote a methodology in your proposal, but you know what? I bet you weren't quite right. The methodology in your project report should be what you actually did, not what you thought you'd be doing. So, update it. Change it around, make it into what you actually had to do, because things are going to change between your proposal and your completed project. I'm okay with that as long as come close to what you said you were going to do. It's fine. But the project report is about what you actually did. Okay, results. What did you find? How did it work? What analysis did you do? And how did your results compare to your expectations? That last one, that's a big one too, because it makes you reflect back and think, did this work out the way I expected it to? I always thought Kubernetes did, but here when we try to use it, we couldn't make it do that, but we could make it do. That's what I'm looking for. And then your future work, if you were to do a project in this area again, what would you do based on what you did for this project? Okay, that's the 4-step workflow that you need to work through. Proposal, I'll give you feedback. You do what you propose to do. You do a presentation of what you did, and then you write a project report, which is a written document. That's it from a process perspective on your project for this class. Now, next I'm going to talk about some of the projects that were done last year. And last year's group was, similar to you, and they did some really interesting, really creative projects. You don't have to do these, but these are ones that have been done in the past. So rootless containers and monitoring. By the way, the themes you'll see across all these are containers, Kubernetes, testing. Those are the things that this group of students kind of zoomed in on. Rootless containers and container monitoring. They talk about two parts to this. Rootless containers is one thing, and then container monitoring. Containers are weird birds. They don't have an entire operating system to them, but they work really well in that they spin up really quickly and can be modified to be so that nobody can change them, and all that kind of good stuff. So they make sense in a microservices architecture. But monitoring those containers can be pretty difficult to do correctly. Providing storage for those containers. Persistent storage can be hard. And then networking in a containerized environment. So networking in a containerized environment can be tricky also. And then last but not least, service discovery can be tricky too. And so, if your containers are coming and going so fast, how does the rest of your architecture keep track of them? That's service discovery. And Kubernetes does a lot of this for you. So Kubernetes is kind of a natural thing to have going in a containerized environment. Now, building your own Kubernetes cluster is really tricky to do. And so if you wanted to do a Kubernetes project, I would probably do it on a cloud, one of the clouds, everybody forks in $10 and you'll have plenty of money to do your project and set up some kind of an architecture and run it in a Kubernetes cluster on Amazon or Google or whatever and test it. that's a good project idea. So for these folks, they used Red Hat's Podman persistent storage for containers, and then a monitoring solution for individual container metrics. So this was kind of a neat idea, and this was a really strong group that did a great job. So, really excited to see their work. So, neat idea, really fun. Continuous delivery pipeline for WordPress. This is another really good idea. Continuous delivery, continuous integration, continuous delivery. Those two ideas come together well, particularly in web scale environments. And you can build these things either on RLS or in a cloud-based architecture, whatever. I love it. This is a great project idea. Now, what would you do with this continuous delivery pipeline? You would do basically our last lab, where we had changes in the software that was being served, and you wanted to test it and push it out into an environment in an automated fashion. That's kind of what this is about, but really cool project. GCP project. So we use a Kubernetes cluster and Google Cloud Platform to host Explorer California. Love it. What a great project, So we did it in RLS. They did it in GCP, just to try it out, see how it works, test it. Love it. What a great project, and not that difficult to do either. And yet very rewarding and great for job interviews. Docker project. Let's see. So they just wanted to do some Docker work, and they wanted to do failovers between Docker servers. And that's a pretty cool idea, because this should work. But it's one of those ideas where should be tested. And so these folks, built a couple of Docker servers and then failed from one to the other. What a great idea. Good project. Infrastructure as code, CI/CD project. So this is a kind of like what we've been doing in the labs, but they added the CI/CD side to it. And great project. Love the testing, love the use of all the tools and stuff. Awesome. Network automation. So, this group of students was really into networking stuff. And, we've been doing mostly systems related stuff, not networking stuff. But in fact, networks are exposed to the same issues as systems, and that people want networks to change really quickly to help to automate deployments and those kind of things. Well, you know what? A lot of networking software is designed to not change quickly, and yet, you can do that. We've got what's his name, the virtual router that we've got out there. Well, that's just a software thing. So, can we use Ansible against a virtual router? And the answer is yes. And that's what these folks did. They looked at network automation. They talked about the set it and forget it mentality, and just did a really nice job on using the same tools that we use for our systems to control systems that in fact were routers and switches and all that kind of stuff. Now, another place where you can go to find really neat stuff is online. Here's opensource.com, something that you should be looking at all the time. And they've got, look at that first line, build a Kubernetes Minecraft server with Ansible's Helm modules. What a great project. If you're a gaming person, if you like Minecraft is probably the game that your dad plays, but your mom plays. But here's a way that you can deploy a Minecraft server using Ansible and Kubernetes. what a great way to mix projects together. So all those kind of things are just great. And you know, look around online for something that looks pretty neat. That, you know, here's they've got other stuff. Build a Kubernetes cluster with the Raspberry Pis. If you got a bunch of Pis around, why not give it a try? Build a Kubernetes cluster with it. They've got some ideas in here. Now, you know, when you read this article, it will look like just do these steps and you're done, right? It doesn't work that well. So you're going to have to, I guarantee there's going to be things that don't work as well as you had hoped. And so you're going to have to dig around and figure out some things. Now, this Kubernetes Minecraft server is written by Jeff Geerling. And you'll see a lot of his playbooks and roles and stuff in Ansible Galaxy as well as GitHub now, right? You know, Ansible Galaxy is basically a front end for GitHub at this point. But Jeff Geerling wrote a textbook, Ansible for DevOps, Ansible for DevOps, and he signed, his username is Geerling Guy. And so any place you see Geerling Guy as the author of roles and things, that's this guy. So, you know, he's really talented. And, you know, sometimes when you see articles like this, it's some rookie and, you know, doesn't really know what he's doing. Jeff Geerling does. So, you know, I would think that if he says that you can do it, you can probably do it. So dig around. Let's see, in this one you don't use a full Kubernetes cluster. There's I just blanked on what the name of the small single box cluster is. Anyhow, it's in there, and that would be a great project. Something fun, creative, interesting that you can sink your teeth into. You know, I love that. I had a couple more back here. Let's see. Okay, Ansible, so group project possible topics. Ansible and monitoring, you know, I love that. Think about how do you extend the lab that we did on monitoring to make it so that it's more useful and real scale. Create a WordPress architecture using Ansible, piece of cake. That would be a fun one to work on if you wanted to. Can you take the WordPress, which is a monolithic architecture, so you've got your database and your web tier in a single box. Can you break that apart so that you can split out the database and put it on a different box? That's a great way to extend that. Create a hybrid WordPress architecture with the web tier on AWS or GCP and the data tier on Arliss or Workstation. That's a cool one. So hybrid architectures are really popular these days because it really matches the needs of organizations these days to have part of their architecture in-house where they feel more comfortable having it, you know, in their own, where they can see the blinky green lights. And part of the architecture out on the Amazon or GCP or whatever, someplace out in the cloud. Well, the natural is to take that web tier, which doesn't really matter. I mean, we just make it, we can just rebuild it on the fly, put that out in the cloud, and then have your data tier in-house. Well, for us, in-house means Arliss or Workstation in the lab. So can you build that kind of a hybrid architecture? Love it. Compare AWS CloudFront to your monitoring architecture. CloudFront's awesome, but it's expensive. So you built a monitoring architecture. How do yours compare? Anything with Kubernetes and Ansible. Now, in Amazon, the Kubernetes architecture is called EKS. In GCP, it's called GKE. So, you know, dig around, look at some of those technologies, see what your thoughts are, and remember, I'm always happy to look at ideas for projects. So if you want to send me a one paragrapher by email, that's fine. If you'd rather Zoom with me about it, that's fine also. But make the project interesting, make it fun, make it exciting. Oh, last thing, do you have to work in the same group that you did your labs in? And the answer is no. If you want to break up your lab group and come up with smaller groups, or mix and match with other groups or whatever, that's fine. Just let me know how things are going, okay? All right, well, take care, everybody. Let me get to the end here, and I will talk to you soon. Bye bye.